everybody. Welcome to another series on PsyTech's webinars. Today we're going to be discussing ethics and the importance of this in this exciting and amazing psychedelic space. I'm so happy to introduce to you our moderator for tonight. He's a good friend of PsyTech's. Guy Lieberman is a social entrepreneur and cultural activist and director of Nahana Foundation. Guy has collaborated closely with some of the world's greatest hearts and minds, including the Dalai Lama. He is the epitome of good business and good ethics. Thank you so much for joining us today, Guy, and I'll hand this straight over to you.
Thank you, Deborah. Very good to be here, an honor. So for the past 2.5 decades, I've been running along the seam between capital and philanthropy. Philanthropy is where much of my activism is supported. And the one metaphor that I can think of is that of the ocean being capital and a lagoon or an inlet being philanthropy. Whereas capital is vast and expands and contracts according to its own set rules, the life of a lagoon is much more fickle. It's based on how the tide treats it. It can dry up or swell. They're both water, but their density differs. So over the years, I've attempted to see how we might be able to blend capital and philanthropy, growth and generosity or deep equity in more meaningful or ethical ways. I'm hoping that the medical psychedelic industry might present solutions to this quandary, and that's why I'm starting to get involved. The opportunities ahead of us are abundant, but we are dealing with a very unique product at a very delicate time in our history. What is indigenous sacred plant medicine and its purpose in the world? Quite suddenly, it forms the basis of this burgeoning new business. But there are vices in the capitalist construct that are obvious to us and possible pitfalls for the psychedelic industry. And yet, great potential benefits if we as a community find alignment between ethics and the principles of free enterprise. So now to you, our speakers. Before I introduce you all to the audience, I want to propose a little game, and that is this. On a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being altruism and 10 being financial gain, where would you, speakers and audience alike, locate yourself? It's not a good, bad scale. It's based on decisions you've made and what moves you, what animates you. So in the audience, you can just drop your number in the message bar below. We're not going to hold you to it. I'm going to open to questions about halfway through the conversation. So please hold them until then, and then the floor is yours. Just to say that Stacey Wallen, unfortunately, she was going to join our panel, but she's had a family emergency. So we hope everything is okay with Stacey, and sorry that she's not able to join us today. So I'll start with introducing David. David Nixad is the original founder of Orthogonal Thinker, Inc., and is a serial investor in a range of companies from tech startups to wellness and psychedelics, and from nightlife ventures to real estate. Orthogonal holds secondary. Good to see you, David.
Nice to see you too. Grateful to be here.
Great. Orthogonal holds secondary shares in anchor companies such as Airbnb, Republic, Equipment Share, and others. So, correct. David, from our communications leading up to this panel, you shared some really colorful experiences that brought you into this space. Can you say a little bit more about what drives you?
You know, what drives me in this space is really my own journey, you know, to be completely vulnerable with you. I've always been feeling a little weird in my skin. And I think growing up, coming from a Persian background, I also come from a cultural Jewish background. I never really fit in. I grew up in Washington, D.C., went to a private Catholic school. And I think like everybody else, you're kind of odd, you're weird, you're looking for something. We're all seeking something. And, I grew up with a form of Asperger's. I'm also very autistic. I self-medicated for most of my life. I had a cocaine overdose when I was 18 years old. I went down a journey of thinking that money was the key to happiness. And at the end of that, I truly hit bottom, and I realized happiness has nothing to do with money. Happiness is about going down your purpose of life, actually doing something bigger, for the rest of the world. And I think that what we're going through with COVID right now, and, just all lives mattering these days, we need to be kind to one another. And I think we've forgotten that. And what I've experienced getting involved with psychedelics about 15 years ago in Hawaii has truly taught me what empathy is, and really learning from those people that are the true, what I would call medicine makers or bench chemist or kitchen chemist. And, we hold very true to botanical alkaloids. Those are the people we support. And as I was telling you earlier, there's a realm of being a walking contradiction. And we believe how you do anything is how you do everything.
Well, thank you. That was straight to the heart of it. Thank you, David.
Of course.
Dick Simon is an entrepreneur, social enterprise philanthropist, and catalyst for change. He works with organizations pursuing FDA and European Medical Association clinical trials for mental health treatments, including PTSD and depression, using psychedelic medicines. He aims to shift public perspective and reduce stigmatization related to the use of these medicines, and is also supporting researchers studying psychedelic treatments for a wide range of indications. Dick, I saw your TEDx talk, excellent. I was very moved by that. So from conflict resolution to psychedelic access, can you share more about why you're doing this work now?
Sure. Well, it's great to be here, and I'm doing this work because I look for opportunities to make a leveraged difference that's sustainable and impactful and creating real change. I've spent a lot of the last couple of decades, since September 11th of 2001, dealing with geopolitical conflict, getting people talking to each other on both sides of conflicts, in the Middle East and Israel and Palestine, but leading delegations to Iran, so that, they're not primarily perceived as, here's this enemy. What brought me to psychedelics were really a couple of things. One is I knew very, very little about it. I grew up in sort of a just say no and, your brain on drugs. And consequently, I'd had an experience in college, but, basically no experience. I learned through a good friend who almost lost their son to severe depression, the potential, basically the traditional psychiatric establishment had pretty much given up on this kid. And by reaching out and getting psychedelic-assisted therapy, this person went from probably never be able to go back to school, never be able to work, but they'd get the medicine right so he wouldn't take his life, to off all meds, a number of mental health issues in our family, and I've gotten to see close up that we need better tools. So the opportunity to help advance these tools and getting people working together who otherwise would be on opposite sides of divides is really, what brings me here. Personal motivation, data motivation, and then some of my own, experience and skill sets, and hoping to make a difference.
Thank you. Thank you, David. Lyanna is the founder of the North Star Ethics Pledge and Development Officer at NAPS. She's a lifelong advocate for social and environmental justice, drug policy reform, and ending war. Lyanna has lobbied Congress, lectured MBA students, advocated for legalization, and supported the work of the Marijuana Policy Project. Lyanna, your life seems entirely committed to the ethical fabric of the psychedelic movement. Can you tell us a little bit more about what motivates you?
Absolutely. Thanks so much. Good to be here with everyone. So my story really begins at a young age. I took the first experience I had with psychedelics was 16 years ago. I attended the MAPS conference in 2010 was my first exposure to that organization that I now work for. And I've been an activist and an advocate for social justice reform and really an effort for collective liberation. And this question of how do we transform the systems that cause oppression in our reality. And I went from occupying Wall Street and identifying as an anarcho-syndicalist with the understanding that the radicals keep the incrementalists honest, to now what I perceive as I've moved a lot internally into an understanding that one of the core tools that we must utilize in order to generate social change is business. And so I became very interested in how to utilize that tool. And I spent years working for a group called the ArcView Group, which is the largest investor network in the cannabis industry. And through that experience, I watched firsthand how the industry went from a group of highly passionate people who had direct connection and relationship to the plant, who understood the context of the social justice movement that the industry was born out of, and who understood the larger implication for integrating cannabis into our society, not just for health and wellness, but for a deepening of our connection with something greater than ourselves, call it the divine, spirituality, all of these things that help inform our lives. And I believe that, you know, we need a sustained commitment for ambitious pro-social and pro-environmental action. And there are values of community, compassion, and social justice that motivate that commitment. And these values are often suppressed by our society. And so for me, it's a very fundamental question of how are we doing everything in our lives? How we do one thing is how we do everything. I appreciate that, David. I live by that. Small is all is how Adrienne Marie Brown would say it. And so I've been really curious about the development at the foundational level of the psychedelic space and how we can generate a culture of compassion and ethics and integrity that can hopefully help to define how this space gets formed moving forward, with the understanding that market forces are so great. It's a kind of David and Goliath sort of thing where it feels almost impossible, right, to have the ethical businesses be the ones that do the best. And I'd like to challenge that because we're seeing a dramatic change in the way that people are thinking about business and investment and venture capital. And we're seeing ESG metrics, and we're seeing the need that businesses that care about the environment and care about the people that they serve actually are doing better financially. And so where I stand in that altruism scale, you know, I've been really unmotivated for personal financial gain in my life. And I recognize that that is because I come from a life of privilege where I have enough safety and security to be able to do things like work for nonprofits and volunteer and work within movements. And I think I rest somewhere around, you know, 7 or 8 on that scale, with the understanding that we do need massive amounts of resources to infuse this industry so that we can increase accessibility and scale the potential of these medicines to help the world. So that's what motivates me.
Amazing. Thank you. Okay, this is very helpful. Look, the North Star Ethics Pledge really moved me when I discovered it. It was only a few months ago that I discovered it, and it's an excellent campaign. It's a brilliant idea and initiative. and it speaks openly and directly to the issues that underscore the future navigation of the psychedelic industry. As it stands, the pledge is a personal one taken by individuals who are involved in psychedelic organizations and businesses, right? Do you envision developing the pledge into something that informs a more formalized regulatory framework for the industry? Something that maybe like guides policy and legislation? Or is it intended specifically and only as a commitment to honor the spirit of psychedelics?
Yeah, so the pledge is really the beginning of a conversation. There was a recognition that there was a need for this conversation within the anchoring community within psychedelics, and also to connect newcomers into the topics and the considerations and the value sets that the anchoring community, the giants whose shoulders we all stand upon, find important. And so for us, it's really the beginning. We just launched the pledge back in April. And it was a painstaking process of talking with and communicating with hundreds of people across our field to try to distill down something that we thought people could really start within is the first principle. And so for us, it really was about is each individual showing up to this work. And what's been really inspiring for me is hearing how companies and organizations and people who are beginning projects within the space are taking this pledge to their teams and to their employees and having conversations around how they're thinking about embodying these principles. And we didn't want it to be prescriptive. We wanted it to be a set of suggestions and considerations for people. Where we're thinking about taking it is yes, we are looking at what it would look like to publish a set of objective metrics, which companies could then publish their reports on, and it could be a tool for accountability. And that project is a 1 to 2 year project, and it's under development right now, but we still feel that we're early enough within this field that we can take our time in setting those kinds of standards. And then in terms of it informing policy, I mean, for us, it's really about generating a culture. And from there, policy hopefully can be born out of that energy as well.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Okay. Dick, through your advocacy work, you campaign for psychedelic medicine to reach those with the most need. Your work intersects academia, the FDA and the European counterparts, and will potentially bring psychedelics into the heart of conflict hotspots, which is a really interesting idea. Have you experienced pushback for your efforts? And if so, where and why do you think this is?
Sure. Yes, there has been some, and it's really interesting. There are kind of two sorts of pushback that I experience. One is based on the overall stigma, the years or decades of programming that people have, either believing that these are just dangerous, that heroin is the same as that all drugs with a capital D are lumped together. Those people I actually find easiest to work with if it's reframed as an issue of mental health. I had someone come up to me at a talk back when we were doing in-person talks, who said, I just can't get on the same, and I knew this individual, and they were much more conservative than I am politically. And I was like, I just can't get on the same page with you, about drugs. So I said to the individual, look, if you think it's a good thing that 20 veterans a day in the United States are taking their lives by suicide, if you think that's good, we're on totally different pages. If you think that's a problem, and I happen to know this individual that's involved in military things, if you think that's a problem, we're on the same page. I may just have some additional information about potential treatments that you haven't been exposed to yet. So that type of opposition, unless it's deeply religiously based or something where people can't hear anymore, is more tractable. There is a second type of issue around philanthropists, where you get many philanthropists who, if you speak with them personally, They will talk about their psychedelic experience, having saved or changed their life or their kid's life, or being one of their most important life experiences. And then you track their philanthropy, and not always, but in many situations, there will be a small, against the scale of what they can and do otherwise give, token amount given to MAPS, which is an incredible organization, to others, and out of concern, and then much larger amounts given for something that, unrelated to psychedelics, out of concern that there still is a stigma and not wanting to be publicly associated. If you even look at MAPS, which did a phenomenal job raising $30 million in their capstone challenge, a reasonable amount of that was, of larger amounts, were anonymous. And that's changing. That's changing, and that's great. But it's getting people comfortable with that internal conflict. And then finally, I would say that there's a lot of pushback, and which is why I'm so excited about this particular panel, within the psychedelic community. I mean, we're a bubble. Because we talk to each other so much, we think we're a really big bubble, but we're really a tiny bubble against the scale of the world. But it's been interesting and somewhat concerning to me, seeing the amount of conflict and disagreement and pushback, if you will, within the bubble. I operate from a place of figure out what your most important priority is, and then work toward achieving that priority. And for me, that would be around, how do we make these medicines available for those that need them? And then other issues which are really important, but take secondary importance to what I perceive as, for me, the top priority. Now, others may have other top priorities. And I often will see the conflict over, medicalization is bad. Pharmaceutical companies are bad. All these things that draw a clear line of good and evil, where there really isn't a line. When I was doing conflict work in the Middle East, there were certain trigger words from either side that end the conversation. You talk about apartheid, and most Israelis stop listening. You talk about terrorists, most Palestinians stop listening. If the goal is to get people talking to each other, work on that. That's the primary goal, and then you can deal with other issues. So those are just a few thoughts.
That's great. Thank you. That's very clarifying. It's interesting. Before, while we were preparing for this panel, there was a lot of chatter in the back room. Deb and I were dealing with some really smart and experienced activists in the space, and there is a lot of very strong views around the path forward, this right path, and it's almost like there's a conservatism and a reform and a radicalism. It's all forming in this within the very industry. I was quite surprised, but it's good to know. And I've seen this in other communities as well. The Tibet support community, supporting the Tibetan freedom struggle. There's a whole range of activists there as well. They have different views, and there's a lot of battling internally. I would hope that because of the heart of the psychedelic community, we might be able to overcome that, and we'll see how this pans out. David, your serial entrepreneurial ventures include very rich and diverse life experience, which you folded into orthogonal thinker, and you have multiple assets. Everything about orthogonal is positioned, how it's positioned speaks about holistic values that run through the DNA of the company. But you recently formed the EI Foundation. So what was the motivation forming the foundation specifically, and how do orthogonal and the foundation interact?
Well, EI Foundation was actually put together about a year ago. My co-founder and I, Jason Hobson, we've actually known each other for 20 years, determined that the idea of EI Ventures as a for-profit entity, we needed to have a mirrored entity. And really, when we discuss things, we really talk about one desire in any business we get involved with. So the one desire with EI Foundation is to, if somebody can't afford nootropics or psychedelics or anything that EI Ventures has, we would give those away for free. So we looked at the TOMS model, we looked at, different models for one-to-one. And the reality for us is my co-founder and I believe in abundance. We believe that no children in this world should go hungry, and everybody should have access. I've gone back to the same vision of the two people that introduced me to Silly to begin with, which was, David, we want this product to be free. And the reality of it is if we can do that and we can come up with a subsidized model, that's what we're going to do. We believe Silly can be free. You can make money in other ways with therapy and other things. But EI Foundation, our sole focus is to give people these products for free if they can afford them. We live in an abundance universe. Nobody should have any shortage of anything.
Right. And just back to the point before, how do you see the community playing out in terms of these different views? I'm interested to see how the actual psychedelic community is being formed, and these sort of different influences and forces. Where do you see yourself in this range, and what are your thoughts around how this can unify? Lyanna, I'd love to hear your comments after David.
Well, for us, we've really gone back to one of the original things we talked about when it was just Jason and I, which is staying in our own lane. At this point, specifically over the weekend, I've analyzed what I would consider the companies that, say they have a real product or they've gone into some type of clinical trial. The reality for me at this point is I don't believe any company has anything really real at this point to go to market. Probably MAPS does. They're probably the most far along, but I believe 99% of the companies out there are completely fugazis. They are companies that are pump and dumps. And as somebody that comes from a, investment background, I wouldn't invest in any of them. The commitment that we give at Orthogonal and EI is that we are all in. Every asset that I own, every advisory share, anything we do is an all-in process. So the reality of it is we will be here 10 years from now. We're not looking for a Johnson & Johnson to buy us. We're not out there trying to raise money based on, IPOs and other things. I've literally analyzed over 100 decks this weekend. Even the first companies in the space were talking about IPOs in their first one-page decks. So the intention is off. I'm not here to talk to you about an IPO. What I'm here to tell you is that my co-founder and I will be doing this till the end of our lives. We are in this. There is no exit for us. We do understand we have a great group of investors. They trust us. They believe in our products. And it's not only about Silly. We make many other what I would call psychoactive materials. Coffee is a psychoactive material. So I think the reality of it is it's hard for me to take anybody seriously that doesn't take their own product. And I've basically talked to everybody in the space.
Thank you. Lyanna.
Yeah, I think the tension you were naming earlier that, some would call infighting or tension within the psychedelic community, I think it's really important to pay attention to it because it's really coming from a place of deep concern, right? And deep care, and this understanding that we can't just give people psychedelics and think that they're going to have the same realizations and come to the same, awakenings that those of us that have had those experiences have had. There is a huge possibility of people taking psychedelics, being in highly suggestible states. There's a really great book, pardon my French, but it's on the cult of LSD cults in the 1970s. And it's one of the most important reads. And there's this whole fractal fascism kind of meme going out there right now, because it's not a given that people who use psychedelics are going to become better citizens of the world and are going to heal from their mental suffering. I think that that's really important to state, and that these substances are not for everyone. And so what I'm promoting and what we're working through with North Star is that we need to, as a larger community and as an international community, distill out what our value system is, and then figure out ways to communicate that and deliver a culture alongside the delivery of these medicines into our society. I've worked with Special Forces veterans with another nonprofit using ibogaine and 5-MeO-DMT down in Mexico. And if those people return home to their family structures, to communities that have no context for the experiences that they've just had, it can actually be even more dissociating for individuals. So there's a really big question here. And I think the legacy community is asking, what are people's intentions? I think what David is naming, I'm also seeing a lot of the pump and dumps. I went through this in cannabis. I already watched this entire thing happen. And the concern is that right now in California, you have a certain demographic of people making millions of dollars hand over fist on cannabis, while another demographic of people is still serving time behind bars for minor cannabis offenses. And to me, that's just egregious. And we cannot repeat that kind of mistake that was made when the policy was written and when the structure for licensure was created. And so I think the concerns are valid and very real, and they're worth paying attention to. I think that we can reconcile the moment that we recognize that there is a scale between altruism and personal profit and gain, and that there are people showing up to this industry on the whole spectrum of that scale. And I caution a lot against investment into the space right now. I do think that there's only a few very viable companies and products out there right now. I think that people see policy reform in places like Oakland, where I'm from, and Denver, and they immediately think that that means that you can go ahead and sell psilocybin. And that's not the case. And I'm glad it's not the case, because I don't think we're ready for that as a society. I do think we're ready for decriminalizing all drugs and making the real issue of substance use disorder into a public health concern. But that's a conversation for another panel. But I also think that extreme caution needs to be exercised for anybody entering into this field. And if somebody's coming in, seeing the writing on the wall, seeing the immense potential of these substances, seeing the utter transformation that is going to be taking place in the field of psychiatry over the next decade as these new modalities come online, I personally think that we need to look at our financial system and what motivates us, but also I question whether or not venture capital is the right money, the right kind of supportive capital to grow the space. I would like to see there be funds that provide low interest, long horizon loans to clinics and independent therapists who want to open their own clinic and treat and heal the community that they work within, and that wealth that's generated and value that's generated then gets fed and can fuel their community. So I'm really interested in decentralized models for scaling access to care as well. That was a little all over the place, but there you go.
I think it was fantastic.
Yeah, excellent. Dick, do you want to say something? Can you say something about the interplay between for-profit, not-for-profit, and the research center efforts to advance your work? And then I think we're going to open it up to the floor to see if there are any questions that you want to post in the chat for the panelists, and let's open it up. So Dick, take it away.
So a couple of things. One, I would agree with Lyanna completely that that there's huge opportunity there to completely revolutionize psychiatric treatment. And if I were to prioritize my things on your 1 to 10 scale at the beginning, that is what motivates me. I'd be very concerned if all the entrepreneurs were strictly at 1 or 2 on the altruism scale, because it takes a different sort of drive to build a company. But so I believe that the answer to a lot of the issues, and ultimately it should have been a lot sooner, but we're going to be seeing it with marijuana, is as science advances and demonstrates that the concept that Schedule I drugs are of no potential benefit and of significant harm just becomes ludicrous. There's just so much data that argues against that with FDA approval, with some of the major institutions that are now doing work in this space. I mean, I'm chairing the advisory council at Mass General Hospital, which is Harvard Medical School's primary teaching hospital, that is looking at all types of potential applications for psychedelics in their Center for the Neuroscience of Psychedelics. Everything from psychiatry to all types of neurodegenerative diseases, potentially even including something like Alzheimer's. So the potential is huge. The cooperation between the for-profit, the not-for-profit, the research institutions, I think that that cooperation is critical and is beneficial for everyone involved. The for-profit companies that are going today, both those that are less reputable and those that are proceeding well, are building on the research that's come out of nonprofit efforts and research institution efforts, and it's an ecosystem that needs each of the players. I mean, research institutions are great at doing research. They're not good at bringing out commercializing products for millions of people. Similarly, you're not going to get the basic science work often done in a for-profit institution. And then a nonprofit kind of spans both of those. But I'd say that the creation of an ecosystem with a strong research piece of it is critical in advancing this work. Because we're in a particular society, and that society or world happens to operate generally, not always, but generally, based on evidence. And to the extent that we are creating evidence and data that people with treatment-resistant depression are better, people with PTSD are better, those are the necessary preconditions to begin to completely shift psychiatry, neuroscience, potentially Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and other diseases, which hold promise. I mean, we have to say that's where research comes in. And the opportunities also, by the way, for collaboration between institutions, nonprofits, and for-profits is critical and should be fostered. I think that the mutual suspicion is not necessarily a very healthy way to foster collaboration. And we've done all we can to sort of try to break that barrier.
Great. And we'll continue doing it. I'm opening up to the Q&A. I have a question for Lyanna from Mike Dax. Do you foresee investment groups mandating that they will only invest in ventures that have signed onto the North Star Pledge?
That would be awesome. You know, this is the truth about this. Is like there can be all kinds of great ideas. You know, we're seeing models put forward. I talk about purpose, the purpose economy, stakeholder capitalism, all these great structures. I love referencing Dr. Bronner's and Patagonia, stellar companies to emulate. And the truth is that as experimental as entrepreneurs can be, if they cannot find the financing to back their ideas, these experiments and these companies won't get to exist. And so it is critically important. And our group at North Star, we do have a small but very impactful group of investors that ascribe to our value system and our beliefs around this. We are seeing movements like the social capital movement, in investment in general, people looking at the quadruple bottom line, going beyond impact. How can we really leverage our dollars to create the most amount of change in the world? And that's the type of investment that I'd be looking for. And I think our hope is that, yes, there's one investment group, Obvious Ventures. They have something called the World Positive Term Sheet. It's very much in the vein of the ethics pledge that we created at North Star. And they require that they have this whole conversation with every company that they invest in, that they, get on board with this term sheet. So I think that's definitely the hope, and it remains to be seen, right? We're still really early on in a lot of this work. And so our hope is to generate a community of investors and get them aligned with entrepreneurs that they can back.
Awesome. That is, it's feeling more and more promising as we discover more of these ventures that are kind of opening up to this level of consciousness. There's a general question for all panelists, so anybody who wants to take this. What is the utility of psychedelics in a therapeutic space, regulated, certified, guides present, versus recreational, available the same way cannabis is from a dispensary? Anyone want to take that?
At risk of speaking too much, I'd be happy to. Look, I think there's an immense value in the recreational use. And one of the reasons why I love working for MAPS and I love working for a guy like Rick Doblin is that while MAPS is best known for its research, there's this understanding that we know that the vast majority of people on the planet are going to be accessing psychedelics outside of a therapeutic context. And so that's why we have a program called the Zendo Project that teaches people psychedelic harm reduction and peer support and the principles of peer support and how to hold space for, you know, people around you who might be having difficult or challenging experiences with psychedelics. And I think that we're moving the needle towards that world and towards that reality. That being said, back to what I'm saying about how psychedelics can also be very dangerous. And I think there are some cases that absolutely need skillful practitioners. They need supervision. They need people who are trauma informed to be showing up and supporting them through these transformational experiences. And so I think that, I think that it's an important distinction to make. We need both to become available. And I don't quite know if we're ready for mass recreational use right now. But there's absolutely a place and a need for the medical context. There's people really suffering with very complicated mental health issues that need the support of a highly trained and skilled practitioner.
Can I add to that?
Please.
You know, I've been watching this show the last couple days, and I'm going to go off on a major tangent. I've been watching Cobra Kai on Netflix. And I think that, you know, I was specifically taught on the island of Maui upcountry by people that live off the land, that grow their own food, that, you know, have gone to seek something different. And I would tell you, just like with orthogonal and EI and every other person out there, we're nowhere close into being ready to, you know, have these products out there on the recreational level, let alone on the medical level. I'm going to tell you right now, I've done 1,000 journeys, whether it's Aya, Combo, Silly, everything you could imagine. I've done it. And, you know, I think it comes down to, just like with, you know, Mr. Miyagi going in and learning from the beginning and having the right seeds planted. We need to start over. We need to be perpetual beginners. I was talking to a person that I admire, Emily Coppa, the other day, and we both agreed MAPS and USONA are doing a phenomenal job. But, you know, when the SEC and, you know, the NEO exchange and the TSX is allowing companies to go public when there's nothing there, it takes a couple $100 million to get a product through clinical trials and other things. So when we talk about products, we talk about them in a 5 to 10 year period of time. So I think it's really up to companies like MAPS and USANA, as, you know, I would consider them the role models, to also, you know who they're dealing with. I find that this whole industry has become a Instagram psychedelic influencer. When I read psychonaut on people's LinkedIn page, I don't even know what that means. For me, there's a meaning of when I take a journey. It's an idea of, you know, putting good juju into anything, whether it's cannabis or food or anything else. So for me, I would love to see that influencer egotistical model taken out. I don't see guys from venture capital banks really prescribing to this type of stuff. It's weird. When I see somebody from Goldman Sachs licensing products from a university, it just feels strange. That's my truth.
So if I can make a comment, I guess a couple of things come up. One is this space is going to require to really fully begin to understand all the potential billions of dollars, because it is
Sure.
Hundreds of millions of dollars per trial, or 100 at least, and then a lot don't work. So I'm concerned that's why I believe more that the opportunity for for-profit ventures, I mean, I think USONA is great. I certainly think MAPS is fantastic, but a number of players in the space are also doing things that are really advancing this work.
They're already selling secondary shares on the market. The original founders are trying to get out now. I mean, that's a problem. There has
I
to
think
be
I think
efficacy. There has to be efficacy. You can't allow people to come in and put money in their pockets and not actually fulfill their promise to people. That's the truth. I mean, Dick, don't take this the wrong way. I've been in that market for 20 years. I've seen it. This is how you get companies that, you know, the grandmother or grandfather that invests in these companies, at the end of the day, it doesn't work out for them. We've seen it in the cannabis space. There are companies trading at 11 cents a share. There were companies that were at $30 billion in market cap. They're sub 1 billion, and the founders are taking $30 million a year paychecks. We got to put a stop to it. It doesn't work. I believe in everything you're saying, but there has to be rules put into place.
And there absolutely should be rules put into place, but most early stage companies in all spaces don't yet have everything put together. That's why they're an early stage company.
These are not early stage companies. These are companies that are raising money at $100 million, $500 million valuations. These are bankers and financiers that are out there breaking every single rule from FINRA to the SEC, coming to raise money in the United States. And a lot of people told me not to speak up today, but let me tell you, I get about a couple hundred emails a day. Happy to share with you because I have the decks from these companies from the beginning. And it's all about IPO. It's all about selling shares and loading the pipe, as they call it.
Wow.
So the underlying assumption, so how would you go about raising the billions of dollars that are necessary?
You go out there and you go out there and you do it the right way. You show people that you actually have something real. You know, when we approached one company in London to talk to them about working with us on our product, you know what they told us? They said, well, this venture capitalist and person that's involved in this company, they've locked us up. And basically, they've told us that they're going to be the only player in this space. So that's not Pono. In Hawaii, we talk about Pono. It's the idea of righteousness. All I'm saying is, as somebody that wants to invest in this space, really look into who you're investing in. What are their parameters and guidelines in their business? I'll be very clear with you. I personally control most of the interest in orthogonal. We don't allow people to go pump and dump shares. I've interviewed every investor that's come in. We're not out there selling secondary shares and doing side letters. That's what it is. We need to have people that get involved to monitor these things. And I love Canada. I actually really enjoy the Canadian culture. I've spent a lot of time in Vancouver, but many of these guys that are in these spaces, they've bankrupted companies in Canada. I have a whole list. I've been asked not to share. I've been asked by multiple lawyers today not to put anybody out there. But as I would say, how you do anything is how you do everything.
Okay.
So, and I'll just add real quick, and I know there's more questions, but I think that, David, what you're speaking to is a much larger problem beyond the field of psychedelics.
Absolutely.
Right?
It's a huge problem.
Yeah, and so here I'd like to just create an invitation for people who are seeking to get involved, who have received the calling to come join this field in this movement, to be deeply considerate of the way that things have been, and that being our reason. Well, this is how you go and raise hundreds of millions of dollars. This is how it's done, and to challenge that and to ask ourselves, how else can we do it? If we are going to use those systems, how do we do it better? And how can we, our very action, transform the thing that needs changing?
It's building a skyscraper. Every piece that goes in has to be thought about. It has to be, you know, we use something in the products that we make. We make all types of products. We use a thing called sonochemistry. It's the idea of the frequency of energy. If you put good love and nurturing in a seed, you're going to have a beautiful plant that comes out of it. That has to happen.
Beautiful. Guys, I have a question from a college student, Joel Abernathy. Anybody can field this. What pitfalls can a current college student avoid when exiting college trying to get into the psychedelic industry? Currently finance major at CU Boulder, and he has a follow-up question, just keep this in mind. Should I avoid the market as a business student? After your...
One thing I'll quickly say is get involved with your local Students for a Sensible Drug Policy chapter. There's a psychedelic pipeline that organization has created. I've been mentoring some college students myself, and there are others like me in the field who are seeking to help students get plugged in. And so I would encourage that. And again, like, I think that's a very good lens, is the perspective of ending the drug war. And then I'll also say that this entire field needs every kind of person right now to show up to it and bring their knowledge and their wisdom and their skills, and that there are plenty of really great people seeking to do things right. And so ask questions, lots of questions. Use the North Star Pledge and use that when you're talking with people. Ask them if they've considered this set of principles and what they're doing to embody that in what they're building. But yeah, this field is going to be growing significantly, and we need people from all walks and all skills to participate.
And absolutely including those from finance and who are familiar with markets and who want to go into that space. I think the idea that someone would avoid the space with that set of skills would be sad and unfortunate.
We need new financiers.
Right. Joel, you'll have to give one of the panelists a call when we're done, so you can line yourself up as soon as you get out of college. Ariel Clark has a question for any panelist. In terms of decriminalization, regulation, and legalization, what would you say are the most important elements to include in any piece of psychedelic legislation or law reform? Open to the floor.
Lyanna, go ahead. We'll follow up after.
I'm like, I mean, the first and foremost is decriminalization. Stop criminalizing drug users. It's a racist war on drugs. It's been incredibly destructive. The opposite has happened. It's cost the American population and global population just so immensely. So step one, decriminalize all drugs, full stop. And then in terms of regulation and licensure, I think that we're still many, many, many steps away from that. The Oregon model, where they're creating a method for licensing facilitators and a training program, and that initiative will be on the ballot in Oregon, fascinating to me. I have lots of questions around, how challenging that's going to be. They're going to need to generate a committee. It will take about 2 years to write the regulations, and then there's going to have to be oversight. And so it's a really complex initiative, but I love that kind of experimentation and that kind of oversight in creating access to a more general public outside of the medical model. So I like the caution and care that the Oregon initiative has taken, but I'm a start with decrim all day personally.
Can I add something, Lyanna? Number one, I want to add these products, specifically things like ayahuasca and psilocybin, they are not legal. You need to do everything by the letter of the law. And I see a lot of people that email me all the time and send me in LinkedIn Messenger. If you're doing something, decriminalization does not mean it's legal to sell these products. So that's number one. And anything that I've done on my own. I would say one thing that I've been discussing with a lot of our investors and people that are getting involved with us now is, let's take a step back. We have hemp, we have cannabis, we have nootropics, we have raw vegan clean foods, we have coffee, which is a psychoactive compound. Let's take a step back and start developing products that are actually really good for us. Let's know where they come from, where are they sourced, where are people manufacturing things. I think that this idea of being a perpetual beginner, we need to remember that. And it's not all about psychedelics. When I see somebody that is unhealthy clearly, and they're a CEO of a psychedelics company, or they're a CEO of a plant-based food company, that scares me a little bit. It's like, how, my grandfather that was a rabbi used to say, don't be the rabbi that goes to the cruise ship and eats pork and then comes back to the synagogue and, preaches not to eat pork. I think that we need to take a different stance on a lot of walking contradictions we have. And let's get things like hemp and cannabis right before we want to jump into a new era and, bankrupt new companies. That's all that's going to happen. I think that we need to build a solid bedrock to these companies before we determine these are like, the next big companies out there. I have people that email me all the time that are telling me they're going to ketamine therapy on a daily basis. We own an Ayurvedic company called Surya Spa. I know for a fact, because people come to us, taking ketamine every day or IV therapy, that blows out your liver. I don't come from a science background or a biotech background, but I do know you do things in moderation.
Thank you.
Dick, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Sure. So let me start with your ketamine comment. There are two different, and this is where nuance in all of this becomes so important. There are two very, very different types of ketamine administration. Mm-hmm. One is for the biological benefit only. It turns out that ketamine helps people with severe depression who are suicidal not act suicidally. So you present in an emergency room, you're suicidal, their choices are restrain you, which is a horrible thing for somebody who's in bad shape to start with, release you, which is an equally horrible idea because you may take action on it, or IV ketamine. So that can help for a short period of time, few days potentially, immediately or almost immediately dissipate the suicidal thoughts. So that's great. The people, no, I'm not aware of people doing it every day because I'm not aware of any responsible person advocating that because it is dangerous and it is destructive. And the fact that there are some clinics that may be doing that doesn't mean you throw out the whole baby with the bathwater. It means those clinics should be regulated and stop from doing things that are going to destroy your liver. It doesn't mean that people who are suicidal shouldn't be treated. But the ketamine is a great example of where the potential of something in a way that wasn't originally envisioned is now beginning to manifest. Ketamine-assisted psychotherapy is something that is done on a much more sporadic basis. And the idea is the same way other psychedelics open you to possibilities and reduce defenses, ketamine can serve the same purpose. And having actually experienced it, it was incredibly valuable. And I know a number of other people who have experienced it. So going to see, ketamine is an example of where Johnson & Johnson is dominating. I think, I think missing the nuance of there's good and bad rather than it is either or. It's kind of the way I end up approaching things.
I'd love to live in a world where all plant medicines, you're able to take them as you want, something that is actually plant-based, not derived through some type of synthetic or solvent application. I was very negative when dabs hit the market. I thought they were very dangerous. I mean, at the baseline of who we are, and I appreciate Ibogaine and ketamine and all these other things, we believe that plant-based products in general should be legal.
So guys, just to say we're basically coming up to the end of our session. We can go a little bit over time. I would like to invite closing comments, if that's okay, so that we can sort of close this out. I think it's been a really substantial conversation, and I feel like we've got enough content to go on for another hour. But let's begin, Lyanna. Any closing comments you have about what came out from this panel?
Yeah, sure. I was just noticing too a comment here that I'll speak a little bit to, but I think for us, there's no kind of stopping the reality that we live in a capitalist society that has a certain set of profit motivation guiding its execution in terms of business. I don't think there's a way for us to regulate or to stop that from happening, right? I think what there could be is enough people who understand that a critical mass of us could generate an alternative to the otherwise inevitable capitalist takeover of this entire field. And so that is where my interests lie, and that is where I see a lot of potential, because there's so many wonderful, open-minded, open-hearted innovative, visionary people that are becoming engaged with this field. And so it makes me feel very inspired that we can create an alternative to what otherwise is potentially inevitable. And I also think that, yeah, I guess that's my main point. I'll stop there. I'm grateful for this conversation in this panel. I think these are really hard topics because they challenge a lot of core beliefs and our understandings of how to scale business and how to grow movements. And I think we're going to see real differences between systems in different countries. In the United States, it's a lot easier to be a rapacious pharmaceutical company than it is to be in Europe, where drug prices are set by a national healthcare system. And so there's a lot of differences that need to be considered as well across our different countries and areas of operation. And the final thing I'll say is, I really am proud of the MAPS model. MAPS is a nonprofit that owns a public benefit corporation pharmaceutical company. It's incredibly rare to do drug development. And I work, on fundraising in MAPS, and we just raised this $30 million. And part of what's challenging is now we have philanthropists that have been giving to this cause, right? And if I'm asking what I want my government to do, I would like them to fund research into psychedelics. That's another policy I would like to see put into place, some dedicated resources. But it's even more challenging to raise funds philanthropically, right? When there's so many new, interesting investment opportunities where people could get a return on their capital. So it puts us in an interesting position moving forward with the understanding that MAPS seeks to further and expand the field of psychedelic science as a public service. We really see our organization, everything we do is open source, all of our protocols, all of our information. We've had lots of opportunity to file patents. We've put everything into the public domain. Patents is not something that came up here, but I think is another critical conversation when we're thinking about how to ethically and responsibly build businesses that don't block anyone else from doing research and deepening our understanding of these substances. So yeah, we certainly have our work cut out for us, and I'm inspired that this conversation is being brought forward in this format, and I hope that we can all continue to think about these things moving forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lyanna.
Dick, would you like to closing comments?
Sure. I would, a few. One would be that this whole idea of keeping the primary goal in mind and keeping people on a same team model, rather than creating divisions based on some aspect of what some people are doing that others may agree with or disagree with. I think that the importance of working together is incredibly important. And I would do all I could to foster that general cooperation. Second is, this is an incredibly, if everybody I'm sure has gotten this from the panel discussion here, this is a very, very nuanced situation. And being aware of how those nuances may affect outcomes is critically important. And then finally, I would say that there are flaws in in capitalism. Certainly, there are massive flaws. There are flaws in pharmaceutical as it is now set up. There are massive flaws. I've always been more of a fan of how do you evolve what now exists, rather than wish it were better and act as though it could or should be better. I'd much rather see progress. I'd much rather see people who are suffering from mental health issues treated soon, in large scale, and work with what is necessary to make that happen. Yeah, and I would say those would be some of the thoughts I'd like to leave people with. Same team, same team.
Perfect.
Same team, same dream.
David?
Team, same dream.
I'm sitting here thinking about it. Number one, I'm very grateful for Guy and Deborah for inviting us on this panel. Thank you, Dick and Lyanna. I always tell people, I'm a perpetual beginner. I know nothing. I'm learning in this space. What I do know is these products have affected my life and who I am today, and I believe they will affect people throughout the world in a positive fashion. I'm going to throw this out there, and I'd love for people to contact me directly. My email address is david@eiventures.com. And really my challenge to every other psychedelic company is to hold themselves accountable when it comes to raising capital when it comes to selling secondary shares and being transparent as to where the original founders are in terms of cashing out. I think that people need to know this. I think it needs to be transparent. And I think that people will make better decisions when they're investing. The other thing is we are in the process of launching our alkaloid accelerator. It's all about botanical alkaloids, not just psychedelics. And we are in the process of becoming a fully vertically integrated company in terms of having our own lab and other things. Please contact me. I have now taken control of EI Ventures as the president and CEO. I reply to everybody's emails. Please contact me. I welcome it. I don't think I'm that important not to be able to get in touch with you. I'm just like everybody else, and I believe every other founder should take that type of a role.
Thank you. Excellent. Well, I don't think this panel could have gone any better. I really was privileged to be invited to moderate. Wonderful to meet you all. I look forward to meeting you all in person at some point in the future when I can get back on the plane. Deborah, would you like to close us out?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Guy. Thank you to all of, for Dick, Lyanna, and David. I mean, my mind's blown. The chat's been insane. And I think it's because of the complete authentic discussion that nobody held anything back. It was completely real. We got real opinions and a real conversation. And it's just inspired, and it's kind of inspired me for part 2 of a round table. Let's add more people. Let's turn this into, because that's the trick, isn't it? It's conversation and it's being honest. And that's the only way we're going to go forward in the direction that we're all hoping and dreaming of. So thank you all very much for joining us. I just now want to just let everybody know before you all run that we are hosting a PsyTech summit on October 27th. This is going to be a summit that has not been seen before. We're hosting small live events in major hubs around the entire world. It's going to be running all day across all time zones. We have Entheon Biomedical hosting in Baltimore, Numinous Wellness in Vancouver, Novamind in Toronto, National Institute of Mental Health in Prague. We have speakers such as Professor Matthew Johnson, Dr. Julie Holland, Professor David Nutt, Dr. Bir Labata from Chukruna, Dr. Robin Carhart-Harris. This event will be free for attendees, and we really encourage people to donate and support our friends at MAPS in Chukruna. That those links will be on our site, ready for you guys to, instead of paying us money for tickets, give it to them. These guys need it. As we've been talking about, we need to fund the research. Without the research, there is nothing else. So let's continue to work together, continue our passion and concern and care. Thank you guys from PsyTech.